Welcome to class 12 of Business Environment. Today we are going to study regarding LPG. LPG is nothing but liberalization, privatization and globalization. So this concept has become very popular throughout the world including India, right? So here first is your liberalization. What is this liberalization? Liberalization is nothing but giving liberty. Liberty to what? Liberty to the restrictions, rules or some conditions, etc. So what happens now when these rules, restrictions are reduced, when it is free, you are going to get more and more opportunities. So liberalization aim is to create better business opportunity, so growth in the business and giving more scope for the business in the private sector. So this we call it as liberalization. What is privatization? Privatization is nothing but giving importance to the private sectors, which means more importance will be given or opportunities will be given for the business in the private sector. Then the next is globalization. Globalization means what? Globally, the business will compete globally, not only particularly to one country, but also it can compete with the other countries also, or we can trade with the other countries. So it will free the economy to compete with the foreign company and reduce the restrictions of import of technology, capital, human resource, etc. So your arguments for or advantages of your LPG. What is the first advantage or argument is LPG will lead to economic growth. So how LPG will lead to economic growth? So there are LPG measures. These LPG measures so undertaken to achieve the economic growth itself, which means the main objective to take the LPG measures was to have the economic growth. So economic growth of India before 1980s was in the range of 5%, and this policy maker so wanted to achieve the growth rate to 10%. So and this was made possible when this LPG was initiated, okay, and when it was seriously undertaken. So growth of agriculture sector, growth of industrial sector and the service sector will contribute for the growth of economy, and the growth in this area is possible through LPG measures. The second one is competitiveness. Competitiveness is nothing but our ability to compete, right? So I said globalization freed the economy to compete with the other country. Okay, so which mean not only the other country, it also helped to compete between the public and the private sectors. So private sectors were made more competitive with the private sectors, and entry of MNCs, so it created more competition. So all over the globe, so competition was there. So the next is reduce poverty and inequality. How it reduce poverty and inequality? So when LPG measures were taken, rules, restrictions, conditions to start a business was reduced, right? So MNCs were there, they entered into India, so they started their business in India. What happens when more business activities takes place? When more business activities takes place, the people or who are there in the nation will have more opportunity to earn, right? So they will get the job, they will earn. As they earn, the poverty level decreases. So inequality and the poverty was reduced. Then the next is efficiency and profitability of public sector. So efficiency and profitability of public sector. So how public sector got profitability and efficiency? So far public sector units were depending upon government. So after LPG what happens? The public sector units were allowed to raise their finance of their own in the markets and in the financial institutions. So what happens, they were given the freedom to frame their own policies and programs. So here public sector units have to compete with the private sector now. What they have done to prove themselves or prove their existence and survival, they started to work better, hence efficiency was there and also profitability was also there. The next is development of SSIs. SSIs means here small scale industries. So this policy, LPG policy, gave more incentives to the incentives and opportunity to SSI. The new industrial policy have increased the investment limit in SSI. So apart from this facility like credit facility, better infrastructure, etc., has given more opportunities for the development of SSI. The next is control over inflation. What is inflation? Inflation means continuously rising in price. We call it as inflation. So what happens when inflation is there, you are going to pay much money for chasing the few goods. So what happens, you have to pay more to purchase the few goods when the rate is very high, and so this was very harmful for the economy. So inflation rate was more than 10%. So it was declared that it was dangerous and harmful for the economic growth and development. So what the policy maker does, so the policy maker is going to restrict the inflation rate around 5%, and this was possible when the LPG measures were undertaken. So the next is not attachments, arguments against LPG. Arguments against LPG. So arguments against LPG, first point says leads to economic sovereignty. So here when LPG came, or when LPG policy, it led to the competition between the domestic business and MNCs. Okay, so due to the superior technology of foreign country, so they had the better product, right? So gradually domestic firm was or may lose their business to the foreign firms. So what happens, when you are going to lose for another, you will be under the control of another. So control over the business and economy will pass over to the foreign firms. So what happens, as a result, it will lose the economic sovereignty. The next is dependence on foreign capital and technology. So dependence on foreign capital and technology is nothing but your dependency. So you are depending, or in the developing country is depending upon the foreign capital and the technology. What happens when we are depending? So dependence on or depending on the technology and the capital of a developed nation to achieve the economic development. So what we think, if we are going to develop or depend upon their technology and capital, we think we are going to achieve the economic development. And as a normal sense, if we see, it is very difficult for them to achieve the efficiency standard achieved by the developed nation. So developed nation, whatever they are going to achieve, it is very difficult to difficult to adopt by the developing countries. So their developed nation or their dependence on the developed nations will never end. So what happens, you are continuously depending upon the capital and the technology of foreign country. And the next is policies under pressure of World Bank, IMF, etc. So here what happens, LPG policy under the pressure of and dictates of the institution like IMF and World Bank. So these bodies are controlled by what? USS and European countries. Developing countries like India will not be allowed to design LPG measures that suits to their domestic conditions. So who will be the dictator? The foreign countries will be the dictator, and they have to follow it. The next is Encouragement to Western culture and consumerism. So encouragement to Western culture. So we are going to forget our, destroy our domestic culture. So as the LPG entered, measures came into existence, people became more modern, more Western in their dress, food habits, lifestyle, etc. They started to spend more on the comforts and luxuries, so than what is actually required. So what happens? We are going to lose our culture. We are going to encourage the Western culture. The next is more divide between rich and poor. So LPG measures came into existence. There was a gap between the rich and poor. So it has increased still. So how it is increased? A rich will have more opportunity to grow. Poor will not have an adequate opportunity due to their lack of resources, poor education. The gap between the rich and poor have been widened. Next is lack of social commitments. So policies of LPG are more favorable towards the rich in the society. Okay, more importance is given to the production of comforts and luxuries which are consumed by the rich in the society. So the necessity of poor people was not even taken care of. The next is the last point says discard of rural economy. LPG policy give more stress, more important to the urban economy. So urban economy, so there are industries, service sectors. So for that they are giving more importance. So the basic structure, basic sectors like your agriculture sector, SSIs, so such areas were neglected. So LPG normally has urban oriented, the problems of rural people and the societies are neglected. Thank you.